Hello staff, today at our faculty meeting after lunch, when we went over our Ccrpi, there were some questions when we got to the area where we got the subgroup performance, the points for our economically disadvantaged and our students with disability. We didn't get anything for our ELL students because they did not, they weren't applicable for us. We don't have enough students to make a subgroup. But we noticed as a whole group that that was an area in which we declined, and so we know that that needs to be a focus for us. Some of you had questions about how that the point system is achieved in that area, and I didn't want to go into great detail because it's very complicated, but I thought I'd make this quick video and help you understand how those points are derived. It may still be confusing to you, but I think you'll understand it better once I show you some examples to help you understand where those points come from, so that you can understand too the areas on which we should work and focus. So this is just an example of from a PowerPoint actually that Atlanta put out, and I'll send you the PowerPoint as well because it has great examples even for things like growth rate, but I liked how it had this with the arrows so that you can see it. We have our FAE, our total number of test scores for our students who count for us. So these are all of the students who count for us, and whether they took the ELA, the math, science, social studies, total number of test scores. Then we have the economically disadvantaged, ELL, and students with disability, and their number of test scores. Then you get a percent of the test scores. And so for them, I think it's 0.73. And so the maximum number of points is 10. Their possible number of points is 7.3 based upon their percentage. Then you have your flag count. How many eligible flags are there? They have 10, but they only earn 2 flags. And so 2 is 20% of 10. And so then they get 20% of the 7.3, so they get 1.5. And here are their 10 flags down here. Like us, their English language learners are not applicable, so they don't count those. But they did not receive anywhere. There is the red. They did not get credit for those flags. They did get this yellow flag over here and this one down here where their subgroups met the performance targets. And so those are the areas, those are the 2 flags that they earned, their 20%. So let's go ahead and look at ours. Let me show you the points system first. So for us, for this year, we had 3,772 test scores. Then for ED and SWD students, we had 1,418 scores. So our percentage is 0.376. And then our maximum number of points, 10. Our potential, which they got from here, is 3.8. Our flag count is 8. We met 6 of the 8, so 75%. So we earned 75% of the 3.8 to get us the 2.9. That's the difference between this year and last year. Last year, when we look at our ELL, economically disadvantaged, and our students with disability, it's not too different with the number of test scores or for students or the test scores for our economically disadvantaged and students with disability. Our percentage was 0.383, so our potential points was 3.8. There were 8 flags. We met all 8 flags, and so we got 100% of the potential points, so 3.8. That's the difference. We met all the flags last year. So let me show you the areas and the flags that we did not meet this year. That's not where I want to go. All right, so here are our flags, and we have to go down and look at the 3 areas that we're specifically looking at. Economically disadvantaged, our English language learners, our students with disability. Remember, our English language learners are not applicable. They're not counting for us. We don't have enough students. So if we look at our economically disadvantaged students, you'll see we have 3 yellow flags, so we get credit for those flags because the subgroup met the participation rate. There were enough students, and they met the subgroup performance target. They did not meet the state performance target, but we did meet the subgroup performance target. Now, in social studies, our economically disadvantaged students met the participation rate. There were enough students, but they did not meet the state nor the subgroup performance target, so we did not get credit for that. Our students with disabilities, we lost a flag, did not get credit for our subgroup in English language arts meeting the state nor the subgroup performance targets. But we did meet the subgroup performance targets in math, science, and social studies, but did not meet the state. So let me show you then those performance targets. What does that mean? Okay, if you remember looking at English language arts for economically disadvantaged, the performance target for the economically disadvantaged for ELA for last year was 51.9. What you need to understand is this year it's jumping up to 56.3. So the concept then is, are our students going to be able to meet that jump? For our students with disabilities, although it was lower at 37.3 to meet it, we're going up to 43.0. Then if you look at math, same concept, 55.3 for economically disadvantaged last year to meet that target, and then 59.4 for this year. So all of our targets are going up. And if you look all the way over, let's look at our economically disadvantaged all the way over. In 2021, 73.9 is what we need for our economically disadvantaged students. This kind of reminds me of No Child Left Behind, when we were supposed to have 100% of our students meeting. And if you look, these targets are based on a weighted average, where beginning learners get no points, developing learners get a half a point, proficient get 1 point, and distinguished gets 1.5. And so the rates and targets are included in all the milestones. And I did want to show you too, if we go back to that example on the PowerPoint, you'll notice that they were eligible for 10 flags, unlike our 8 flags, because this is based upon, I assume that their example is from last year, because the English language arts and the reading were separated. And so that's why they were eligible for more flags than we were eligible for. But I did want to show you that, there's a lot that goes into coming up with how we get the points for our English language learners and our students with disabilities and our economically disadvantaged. But those are areas, so for us, we need to work with our economically disadvantaged students in social studies and our students with disabilities in English language arts. Those are the two areas where we did not meet our performance targets, and then you saw that those performance targets are going up so that we can meet those and receive those performance flags, so that on the performance target indicator for Ccrpi, we can get the most number of points. So if that makes any sense, let me also show you, some of you had questions about the exceeding the bar. Remember, we talked about that today. There are actually only possible points, 2.5 possible points. We receive the percent of students earning a passing score in 3 middle school courses in the fine arts, career exploratory, or world languages. And so that's how we got that half of a point. I talked about the CTAE today. And then the other area that you could get it in is students having at least 1 high school credit by the end of grade 8. But the benchmark has to be 73.8% of students. We did have 22.4% of our students getting at least 1 high school credit, but you can only get a half a point if at least 73.8% of your students are getting that high school credit. So we're nowhere near there. And then the school has earned a STEM certification. So if we get STEM certified, we can get half of a point. We could also get a half a point for our percent of teachers utilizing the SLDS, which, we've talked about that. That is not something I want to try to strive for, because I think each teacher has to have something like a total number of hits. It has to be, I think, like 200 or 250 hits a year for each teacher, and so that's not an area that I think we need to focus on for a half of a point. The other area that you can get a half of a point is having that innovative practice, and if you see PBIS is there, and so that's the area where we're going to apply and get that for next year. Remember, in previous years we had applied in that area for Read 180, but we did not receive that this past year. So I think that just kind of explains it in detail just a little more to you, how those two work, because, excuse me, they're, especially the economically disadvantaged and the students with disability, it's very foggy because it's all about a percentage and it's points, maximum points, potential points, and then our flags all fall into that, and how we get credit for our flags based upon how the students score, and they have to meet targets, which is totally different than our achievement, which is just developing and higher, or even our achievement gap, looking at the growth rate. And so, you know, when we look at the other areas, they are just easier to understand. This are gap size, this are gap progress, so they take the higher of the two, and that's what we received, and so that's our number of points, and then our possible points. It's much easier to understand than when we look at our students with disability and our economically disadvantaged students, but that's not to say that we can't understand it and see where we need to focus. So I hope that this explanation kind of clears up a little bit of your questions that you had today about how we get about the 2.9 points that we received this year, which is lower than what we had last year, and what we can do to focus on that area of the CCrpi. Yeah, Ccrpi. All right, thanks.